My parents made it very clear to me and my brothers and sisters at a very young age that salvation didn't work on a family plan. My mom is saved, dad is saved. Now y'all need to make a decision for Jesus yourself. All growing up, I had the head knowledge of who Jesus was and what he did or whatever, but to me, the world was sexy. And I remember walking down that aisle again and giving my life to Jesus. That feeling and that moment lasted for about 3 or 4 days. He was like, the decision you made on Sunday, was it a real decision? Is it something that you really want to do? Do you really want to follow Jesus? And I remember looking at him and just saying no. So now I'm falling in love with the rap culture and hip hop culture, and they're all about the money, the girls, the clothes, all these sorts of things. And I wanted that. And I get all these things, and there is still no satisfaction. And the voice asked me a very simple question. If you died tonight, where would you go? My name is John Stevenson. If we want to be specific, I'm John Stevenson Jr. I'm named after my dad. I'm 35 years old. I am a father. I'm a husband. I'm a man who tries his best to love Jesus every day and look like him as much as I possibly can. So I grew up in a place called Killeen, Texas. I am Texas born and raised. Killeen was a semi-small military town. My mom and dad both at one point were in the military, but my dad was ultimately the one that was in the military, and he ended up retiring out there. So a lot of my life was spent growing up in this military town. It wasn't quite the backwoods, but it also wasn't quite your city area like Dallas or Houston or anything like that. And life was pretty simple. I remember at about the age of 7 or so, going to this really small white building, and it was a church, and it was the first time I had ever gone to church, and my mom had took me because she had recently given her life to Jesus, and she packed me and my younger brother and sister up and took us to church. My dad did not go. My dad was not a believer at the time, and my mom was doing the best she could to live for Jesus and walk out this new walk. Man, her testimony in and of itself is absolutely crazy, and I love when I hear her tell it. But she was my introduction to Christ. Matter of fact, she texted me, I want to say about a week ago, and she just simply said, I introduced you to Jesus in 1997, because that's when she gave her life to Christ and again started taking us to church and things like that. So I remember regularly going to church with my mom and things like that. And I remember often trying to, me and my brother and sister ask my dad to come to church with us. 'Cause, I mean, we're kids and we're just excited to do things. We want to do everything with our parents, right? Like mom is going, why is dad not going too? So Pops didn't go to church. And I remember my dad, he would smoke, he would drink, he would curse, he would do things. He didn't like abuse us or nothing like that, but he was an unbeliever, right? You let him tell it, he was an absolute monster. But he was my dad. I didn't think anything of it. But I remember a few years later, around 99, 2000 or so, my dad gives his life to Jesus Christ, and he has like this radical transformation. Like I remember before my dad got saved, I remember him asking me questions like, hey man, go in the refrigerator and grab me a beer, right? And my mom used to hate that. Like she used to be so upset about him asking us to grab him beers. And he's like, what? Get my son to get me a beer. But I remember after he got saved, man, the transformation that I saw in my dad was absolutely crazy. So now everybody's going to church, and now we're all at church all the time. prior to my dad getting saved. I remember watching my mom serve in church. My mom was an usher, and she would usher, I want to say, every weekend, man, in there with the white gloves and the uniforms and the usher badges and all that kind of stuff, old school Baptist church thing. And then when my dad gave his life to Jesus Christ, I remember watching him serve. I'm talking about at a high clip. My dad was a singer. He used to love to sing, and he used to do like R&B music before he got saved. Now, he wasn't a celebrity or anything like that, but I remember my dad being a singer. So when he gets saved, he joins every choir at the church, y'all. He's in the mass choir. He's in the adult choir. He's helping with the men's choir. Like, he is doing it all. He started helping with the youth ministry, right? 180. So now I'm in this house with these two believers, doing their best to live it out for Jesus. And they would make us go to church, and they would try to get us involved and, do the Easter speeches and choir and all the things, man. I remember they put us in this program called Bible Drill, where we would learn memory verses, and we would go to competitions, and we had to learn the books of the Bible and all that kind of stuff. So my upbringing was in a Christian household. And I think one of the most unique things that I remember growing up in a Christian household was my parents made it very clear to me and my brothers and sisters at a very young age that salvation didn't work on a family plan. It was, my mom is saved, my dad is saved, now y'all need to make a decision for Jesus yourself. And they would be explicit about it, right? They would teach us all the right things. They would teach us the word of God. They would teach us how to act, but they would also make mention that, hey, you at some point have to make a conscious decision for yourself to follow Jesus. And we're just going to put you in the right environments to learn more and to do all those things so that you can make a confident decision for Jesus. And that's how they raised us, man. That's how they raised us all the way up. I want to say around my 8th grade year of school. Matter of fact, it was the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade. My dad is called to pastor a church, so he starts his own church. And if anybody else is a PK out there, you know that when dad starts a church, everybody in the family starts a church. So, we're all doing something in the church. And I remember, it's crazy, my first serving at my dad's church was in audio and visual, right? He had a little camcorder that was set up, and I would have to, record his sermons, and I would play the music in the back on a boom box because he didn't have a choir. And that's what I did every Sunday, in my high school years and things like that. So with my parents kind of being so intentional about teaching us the importance of making a faith decision, if you will, or a decision to follow Christ intentionally. I remember there were 2 moments growing up in this Christian household where I gave my life to Jesus, right? And I remember being about 11 or 12 years old. This was before my dad started pastoring. I remember a friend of mine, old school Baptist church, they used to do altar call every weekend, right? So there's this, if you want to give your life to Jesus Christ, come out of the pews and come on down, and et cetera, et cetera. And I remember one of my friends got up and he walked down, and I was like, well, if he walking down, I need to walk down too. So I walked down, and I want to say around the age of 12, I get baptized, right? Now I did it because my friends did it. And all growing up, I had the head knowledge of who Jesus was and what he did or whatever, but it was just my life, right? Like, it wasn't, I can't say at the age of 12 I had some immaculate conversion or anything like that. Again, I went to church and I was taught that this was the truth, so I believed it because that's what I was taught, and all those sorts of things. But I wouldn't say that at that time I actually gave my life to Jesus. But then again, at around 15 or 16, I remember being in church and just being overwhelmed with, like, I guess, the knowledge that I was a sinner and that I was just doing wild stuff. And when I say wild stuff, to me it was wild. I had got introduced to pornography pretty early, not intentionally, right? Like, before my dad got saved, he would have magazines and things like that. And I came across them by mistake. So now this lust thing has arisen in me. And around the age of 15, I'm realizing that, man, the porn, the masturbation, the cursing, and the doing wrong, man, being sneaky, all that kind of stuff was just not right. And I remember walking down that aisle again and giving my life to Jesus. And that feeling and that moment lasted for about 3 or 4 days. And I remember my dad doing his best to kind of try to disciple me, in those couple of days. And hey, man, you should, find some time to pray, man. Find some time to read the Bible. And I just wasn't doing it. And he came to me and he was like, hey, man, what's going on? And he was like, the decision you made on Sunday, was it a real decision? Is it something that you really want to do? Do you really want to follow Jesus? And I remember looking at him and just saying no. I was like, I don't think that's something I really want to do right now. And some people would say, well, why would you not want to do that? And the reality is, to me, the world was sexy. The world just looked better. And I grew up in a house where I wouldn't say the world was shielded from me, but my parents had a standard, right? There was no BET in the house. There was no MTV watching in the house. There was no VH1, right? There was no R-rated movies. PG-13 movies were even a bit iffy or whatever, right? So there was a standard of our house, and there were a lot of things that I was still interested in. I remember being introduced to the art of rapping and writing rap music in 7th grade. So now I'm falling in love with the rap culture and hip hop culture, and they're all about the money, the girls, the clothes, all these sorts of things. And I wanted that, man. I thought it was the coolest thing. I'm watching rappers talk about how many girls they have, and I wanted, at this point, I want sex too, because I've been introduced to pornography and lust and all these sorts of things. So when my dad asked me that question, I knew that after watching him and my mom change their life or Christ change their life, that I can't go out and try all these things and call myself a believer. So I didn't want to live for Jesus just yet. I wanted to see if the world was as big and bad as they made it sound. So that was my new pursuit. Losing my virginity, right? Getting money and fame and all those sorts of things. Just doing things my own way. And I remember saying the wildest thing in hindsight that I could have ever said. I remember one day looking to God and just saying, hey, man, just wait on me. Just wait on me. I told myself that by the age of 35 or 40, once I kind of got the sin out of my system, I would give my life to Jesus. And I just remember saying, God, just wait on me. Just wait on me. And I think that's maybe one of the craziest things that anybody could say. But I'm grateful that he did wait on me, but just not as long as I wanted him to. So I go through high school, I graduate, and I go to the University of North Texas. And I get to the University of North Texas, and I had this dream of playing professional basketball all my life. Now, in high school, I didn't make varsity or anything like that, but I heard, underdog stories before of people who came out of left field and made their way to the league and things like that. So I just knew that I had another shot at going pro by, somehow walking on to this UNT basketball team, right? Just practicing and being good. And I remember going to the rec center at UNT, going in that gym and getting straight dog walked. I'm talking, I got ran by bio majors and art majors and all that kind of stuff. And it was that day I gave up on that dream and decided that I wanted to be a rapper now, right? I enjoyed writing rap lyrics. I enjoyed the art of metaphors and similes and wordplay and things like that. Just a music head. And I started pursuing that while just being in college, trying to figure out what I was gonna do. And in hindsight, I realized that these are some of the things that I truly enjoyed, but I also was trying to get to a place to where I could be seen and feel validated and accepted and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't like super popular growing up, but I saw the popular kids and I saw how people treated them. I was like, man, I want that. I knew that if I could play basketball for a living, I would be quote unquote popular and I would be seen as valuable and all these sorts of things. And I don't know if there was maybe something deep down inside of me that felt that there was more to who I was than people knew, and I felt like I had to show it to them in all these different ways. But I was pursuing everything but God, and I was trying to make a name for myself outside of Him. So I get to college and I'm trying the rap thing and all this kind of stuff. And I'm also enjoying this freedom away from my Christian upbringing. So I remember going to college telling myself I didn't want to smoke or drink. It just didn't seem appealing. And then one day in college, I decided I wanted to try drinking. And I got drunk and I loved every moment of it. So now I have two major vices. I have the pornography and the lust, and now I have this thing called alcohol, to the place where I wasn't a social drinker. I would drink to get drunk or to get tipsy or to feel something, right? And that again became just a vice for me. I mean, I would drink as often as I could, man. If I could afford it, I would have drank more. But I guess God knew that He couldn't put extra money in my pocket to indulge in that way too much. So I started underage drinking, partying a little bit, things like that. Again, still trying to make a name for myself, still trying to be seen. I find out what Greek life is, right? And I join a fraternity, and I'm hosting events on the campus, right? I joined a theater group. And I did a play with them. So now I'm trying to rap. I'm trying to do this semi-acting thing. I'm pursuing trying to be in this fraternity, right? And then I get in and all this sort of stuff. And in hindsight, man, God showed me that I didn't need any of that stuff, but I'm still pursuing it. And I get all these things, and there is still no satisfaction. Right, I still don't fully know what I want to do. I have an idea, but I don't fully know. So I'm living my college life, and I end up getting an apartment, getting a job, working at this apartment, and just the sin in my life caused me to make foolish decisions. And I guess this is where the shift starts to happen, to where I start making my move towards Christ, or I guess better yet, Him start making his move towards me. I get fired from my job at this apartment complex, and one of the deals of working for the complex was if I was working there, they were paying my rent. And immediately after I got fired, they're asking for the rent, knowing they're the ones that were kind of quote unquote paying me. So I had to leave, and I end up technically homeless. Right? I don't have another apartment. I don't have anywhere else to actually live. So I'm living on my two of my homeboys' couch, and no job. Still got a little bit of money from the job, but not enough to pay rent or anything like that. So one night, I decided, well, I got a pocket full of quarters. I'm gonna go to this place called Fry Street that was in Denton on the campus of North Texas, and I'm gonna get drunk, kind of blow off some steam. So hit up two of the homies. We go out to this bar called Sidebar. I'll never forget it. And it was December 20th, 2012. And again, don't have a job. Go to this bar, and we start drinking, man. We got punches and shots and all this kind of stuff, on the table. And again, we there early too, because it was 50-cent wells, so we was drinking on a bargain, right? So we're doing our thing, and I remember hearing something about like the world ending on December 21st, 2012, like according to like the Mayan calendar or something crazy like that. And I remember sitting there with the homies, and I remember asking this question, and I said, y'all, wouldn't it be crazy if the world actually ended tonight? And they said, yeah, that would be crazy. But what was crazier was their responses after that. One of them says, I'm not necessarily worried about, the world ending, because I know where I go when I die. and he takes his shot or whatever. And the other one's like, yep, I'm straight. I know I'm good. When the world ends, I know where I'm going to. And they take their shot. And I remember kind of looking at them like, y'all are real confident. And I remember saying to myself, well, I know if the world ended tonight too, I know where I'd go to, and I don't think I necessarily want to go there. And I remember them asking me, like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I know if I died tonight, I'd go to hell. And they were shocked. Now, mind you, all three of us just living in sin. Like, these are not just, random associates or just random guys that I'm kicking it with. These are people I spend regular time with. And when I tell you we're living in sin, we are living in sin, right? And I remember, what I was taught growing up and what it meant and what it looked like to give your life to Jesus. And so they started questioning me about, why I said what I said. And I said, man, I know I'd go to hell because I've never truly given my life to Jesus Christ. And I remember one of them said, but bro, it was you that told me to trust God when we got fired, because he actually was my coworker. We both got fired on the same day because we were just being foolish. And he was kind of freaking out about it. And I remember, and I did tell him to trust God, but I told him to trust God because it just sounded like the right thing to say, and because he was just really struggling. And I said, well, yeah, bro, I just told you that because I knew you were kind of going through it, and it was just the right thing to say. I was like, but I haven't been living for Jesus. I've never, just surrendered my life to him. And this guy tried to convince me that I was a Christian. He's like, nah, bro, you're saved, man. You go to heaven. But I knew the truth. I knew I wouldn't. I knew what being a Christian actually looked like because I had two really great examples growing up in my house, my mom and my dad. And the night got more interesting after that conversation ended, because after the conversation ended and after he said that to me, I heard a voice, and the voice asked me a very simple question. If you died tonight, where would you go? Now, mind you, if any of y'all watching have ever been in a bar, you know what a bar environment looks like, sounds like, feels like. It's not a quiet place by any stretch of the imagination. And mind you, I told you I had been drinking, so I'm starting to feel it. I'm feeling the alcohol or whatever. But the voice is asking me, if you died tonight, where would you go? So as I go throughout this night, still trying to enjoy myself, I keep hearing this voice asking me, if you died tonight, where would you go? And it's getting clearer and clearer as I'm getting more and more inebriated. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm still hearing this question. I remember stumbling to my car and getting to my car and getting in the car, hearing the voice again, if you died tonight, where would you go? I remember driving home drunk, right around the corner, not too far, right around the corner or whatever, but driving drunk nonetheless, and hearing this question, if you died tonight, where would you go? Get home, if you died tonight, where would you go? I go to sleep. I wake up the next morning, and it's the same voice, just a slightly different phrasing of the question. If you died today, where would you go? And I was a big fan of Twitter at the time, and my routine was I wake up in the morning, I hop on Twitter, scroll Twitter, tweet, whatever, waste time, right? I'm unemployed. What else is there to do, right? And I remember sitting in front of my laptop, and I couldn't really dive into Twitter like I wanted to. And I started thinking about, if I died, I would go to hell. And the alternative route is give my life to Jesus. And I started thinking about why I had never given my life to Christ, and why I was running from him. And sitting there, I came to this realization, and I picked up the phone and I called my dad, because I knew that if anybody could talk with me about Jesus, it was him. And I remember calling my dad, and he answered the phone, which felt like almost immediately. And I said, Dad, I think I realized why I never gave my life to Jesus Christ, and it's because of you. And I think most people would be offended by that or be taken aback, but his voice was so calm when he responded, and he just said, "Oh yeah?" He said, "Why is that?" And before I called him, I came to the realization that he was the reason why I had never given my life to Jesus Christ, not because he had done something wrong, but in my eyes, he had really done something right. I watched what my dad was like before Jesus, and I watched the radical life change that he had, and how he walked in integrity, and how he walked uprightly before the Lord to the very best of his ability. He wasn't perfect or anything like that, but man, to me, he was the perfect example of what a Christian man was. And what I told my dad was, I watched him live this life of a believer, and I didn't think that I could live up to it. I didn't think I could do what he was doing. I didn't think that I could be that saved, or I could be as clean as he was. And I remember him saying to me, he said, son, he said, here's the thing you got to understand. He said, God doesn't want you to be a Christian like me. He doesn't want you to be a Christian like T.D. Jakes or like any other believer you know. God wants you to give your life to him and be the best Christian that you could be, and you walk out your relationship with him. He's like, God just wants you to be sincere. He just wants you to be real and really surrender your life to him, and he'll do the cleaning up and all that kind of stuff. And it's crazy because he says that, and then I say, well, Dad, I can't come to Jesus like this. I gotta stop drinking and watching porn and stuff first. And he says, son, come on, man, I've taught you better than that. You know that you cannot do it on your own. You need Jesus to help you to overcome all these things that you're struggling with and that you're dealing with. And I remember, even prior to this conversation, just realizing that all the things that I was doing out in the world were all so temporary, right? It was, you sleep with somebody, and once you're done, it's over, right? You get that temporary feeling of satisfaction, but that's it. The drinking thing, right? I kept drinking because I was trying to chase that feeling of the very first time and never being fulfilled, right? Like you get drunk and you get that buzz feeling, but then it has to go away. You can smoke and get high, but then you got to come down at some point. And there was this pattern of temporary. I'm pursuing women and trying to, do right by them, but the situations were temporary. And that played a part in just even me calling my pops too. Like, man, I'm hearing this voice telling me, asking me if I died tonight, where would I go? And also realizing that I'm tired of temporary, right? I'm tired of things that just start and stop, come and go, right? And just never fully being satisfied. So now I'm hearing my father tell me, hey man, you need a savior. You need Jesus. Jesus is the only person that can fill that hole. And he doesn't want me to be like him or any of the other Christians I knew. He just wanted me to be two things, faithful and genuine. He wanted me to genuinely give my life to him, and he wanted me to just faithfully follow him every day to the very best of my ability and let the Holy Spirit do the work. And when he said that over the phone to me, I remember just getting really silent. And I remember feeling like a little boy again, right? I'm a grown man, right? Sitting outside of my homeboy's apartment, having this conversation on the phone with my dad. But I felt like a kid again. And I remember my dad breaking the silence saying, okay, son, so now that you know the truth about what God actually wants from you, what's stopping you now? And I could barely open my mouth, but I said nothing. And he says, okay. And he says, is giving your life to Jesus something that you want to do right now? And I remember, again, barely being able to open my mouth, and I said, yeah. Because at this point, I had no more reason to run. At this point, I knew that if I said no to that invitation, that I was going to be operating in insanity, going back out to the bottle, going back out to the women, going back out to pursuing fame on my own or whatever the case may be, and ultimately ending back up at a rock bottom place. And it was that day, December 21st, 2012, outside of my homeboy's apartment, wearing some black windbreakers and this red Spider-Man hoodie that I took from my brother before I moved off to college, that I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Me and my dad prayed over the phone, and I surrendered my life to Jesus. And I remember as I opened my eyes coming out of that prayer, there was a level of illumination and brightness to the world around me that I had never experienced before. It was like absolutely crazy. So I went inside and I was just like, wow, I'm saved now. I'm a Christian now. I'm a believer. And I remember shortly after, I'm sitting on the couch, my roommate walks in, or my homeboy whose apartment I was staying at. He walks in and he said, hey, what's up, bro? You good? I said, yeah, man. I just gave my life to Jesus. And he looked at me, he said, oh, that's what's up. And he walked to his room. And I called a few people that I knew were Christians that were, on the college campus with me. And I remember this guy named W.C. Garrett. I never forget him. I called him and I told him that I had just given my life to Jesus Christ. And he said, bro, where are you at right now? And he was on the highway heading somewhere. And he had just so happened to pass the exit of the apartment that I was at. And he was like, bro, I'm turning around right now. And he's at my apartment in like 5 minutes. And he came and he hugged me and he celebrated, the fact that I had gave my life to Jesus. And he said something to me. He said, bro, I had a whiteboard in my room and I had a list of people's names on it. And I said that if God ever saved these people, that the enemy will get a headache. And he said, your name was on that list, man. And he said, and I'm so grateful to hear you say you gave your life to Jesus. And that was the beginning of my walk with the Lord, man. So from there, I started to do my best to live it out. I knew that I needed to find a church home, so I did. And God just started, showing me things about the life that I was living and things that I had to give up. I ended up leaving and denouncing my fraternity. Just God showing me some things there that just weren't clean and that weren't of Him. And I remember trying my best to change some of the stuff that I was partaking in and all that kind of stuff. And I remember God just kind of showing me, He said, man, you can't change this. This system and this structure is what it is. You have to come out to be the most effective. And I did. And in doing that, there was this liberation that I started experiencing, and God started speaking to me in different ways. And I remember after doing that, I ended up losing another job. And this is where I guess the God speaking to me a little more clearly starts to come into play, and me trying to follow and just be in His will. I lose this other job, and I'm at church one day, and a guy from college, this is all after I've graduated, ends up coming to visit the church, and me and him are just catching up. And he says, hey, man, what are you doing for a living now? And I said, man, I'm not doing anything. I just lost my last job. And he says, hey, bro, you should go and be a teacher. And I was like, a teacher? He said, yes, bro. He said, you're single. You don't have any kids. He said, bro, I remember the stuff that I would watch you do at UNT, man. He said, the kids will love your personality. You get to impact the next generation. And he said, and the pay is not bad for somebody that's single with no kids. And I was like, nah, man, I don't know about dealing with other people's kids. And I remember hearing God's voice again. It was the same voice that I heard that night asking me if I died tonight, where would I go? And now realizing that it was God's voice, that same voice said to me, why not? The why not started to make sense because He brought something back to my remembrance. So if we rewind the story a little bit, when I was in college, I used to like host events and things like that, MC events, and I started to fall in love with it. And I told myself I wanted to be like Nick Cannon or Ryan Seacrest, hosting game shows or red carpet events and just, standing before people. And I remember even as an unbeliever sitting in my dorm room saying, I want to stand before people for the rest of my life and talk, and I want to be a household name. That was my own personal desire. And when God asked me that day, why not, when the brother mentioned being a teacher, God then said to me, if you become a teacher, you'll stand before people every day of your life and speak, and you'll be a household name. And when God spoke that to me that day, I said, I'm going to go pursue being a teacher. I'm going to go do it. And God started putting people in my life, and he made the transition into teaching oh so smooth, man. And before I knew it, I was teaching. Before I knew it, I was teaching. And that was one of the first times I started to realize like what God was like calling me to do. And God just kind of showing me what my gifts were. All the things that I had been doing prior to giving my life to him were all kind of my gifts operating, but just operating outside of him in some way, form, or fashion. And now he was saying, hey, this is the route I want you to go, as far as the gifts and the things that I've already placed inside of you. So I started teaching, man. I started teaching elementary school. My first job was as a teacher, was a 5th grade teacher. And around that same time, I was about to get married. So we rewind a little bit. I met my wife on Twitter, and we met because at the time I was still in my fraternity and she was in the sister sorority, and that's how we made the connection. And at the time she wasn't a believer, and we would talk and communicate over the the internet and text and FaceTime and all that kind of stuff. And then we had a falling out, and we stopped talking. And in that time of us not talking, she ends up giving her life to Jesus. We reconnect, and she's now on her way to Texas for us to be married. And this was another one of those spaces in which, again, I'm just starting to learn and hear the voice of God, where he is kind of showing me who my wife is, and we're having conversations about what we believe God is wanting to do with our marriage and things like that. And I'm watching him move and provide in different ways that I never would have expected. I mean, for our wedding, we didn't have to pay for our venue. She didn't have to pay for a dress. And we just watched how God did so many amazing and miraculous things as he was bringing us together for this particular covenant. I mean, it wasn't an easy process, and everybody wasn't always happy about it, but it was in that moment where I also just kind of learned to trust God, do your best to obey him, and he'll handle the rest. And it was also in that process where I learned that sanctification is not always easy, because I then get married, and I thought I was going to be this great husband. I thought marriage was going to be easy, and I actually ended up being one of the worst husbands on the planet, man. Struggling with pornography in the marriage, and my wife struggling with her mental health due to some of the things that I'm doing, and just naturally some of the things that she's experienced in life. Mental health is a big thing, and I remember God just working on both of us and showing us who he was, and us having to really combat the spiritual warfare that was hitting our family. I mean, in the midst of it, we're having kids, and one of my kids, my first son, ends up in the NICU for almost a month, and just God just really refining us and working us and showing us how to really put our faith in him, and what does it look like to pray and be consistent and all that kind of stuff. It was a whole new world and a whole new journey. But I'm grateful to God that we got through it and we learned a lot through it. And it kind of just takes me to like another big point in my testimony. One day my wife comes to me and she says, hey, I've been doing some research and I've been praying, and I think God wants us to move to Plano. Plano where? And she says, Plano, Texas. Now I'm like, okay, here's the thing I knew about my wife. My wife is from Sacramento, California, and she's from a suburb outside of Sacramento. And Killeen is nothing like this suburb that she grew up in. So in my mind, she come to me talking about Plano. I'm like, girl, you just want to get back to the suburbs? Leave me alone. And she says, no, I really think we should pray about this. Like, please, just pray about it and consider it. So I go to God and I pray about it, and he confirms, man, I want you to move to Plano. So at this point in my life, I'm like, okay, cool, we're gonna move. I'm still teaching. We got a family now, all this kind of stuff. And we get ready to start planning the move to Plano. And I go to God and I say, okay, God, I trust and believe that you'll give us a house or a home to live in when we get out there. God, I know you'll open a door for me to get a job. I say, but the thing I'm concerned most about is where do you want me to go and serve you? And I had already made up in my mind that I did not want to attend one community church. And it's not because I had heard anything negatively about it, but because I knew it was a big church. I knew it was a mega church. And I came from small church, small town, all that kind of stuff. And I had heard negative things about mega churches in general, not necessarily one community. So I just wasn't looking forward to it. Now, mind you, I had also heard about one community church just as a church itself when I was going to school at UNT. Again, nothing negative about it, but I just knew about the church, and I knew that it was a bigger church. So I was like, I don't want any parts in that. Let me go see if I could find something else. And I remember one day, as we were again planning the move, I'm still praying about what church to go to. My wife had heard about one community church herself, and she's listening to the live stream before we got ready to go to church. And I heard this guy speaking with this Jamaican accent, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's Dr. Conway Edwards, the pastor of that church. I didn't know much about him. I just knew that he was Jamaican. I knew he was a pastor, and I had heard his voice before. And I remember saying to God that morning, I said, okay, God, I told you I didn't want to move to Plano. I told you I didn't want to do a lot of things. I said, let me stop telling you what I don't want to do. And I said, God, if you want me to move to Plano and go to one community church, I'll go. And before I could even get the thought all the way out of my head, he said, that's exactly where I want you to go. Now, I'm not one person that claims to just hears God's voice clearly all the time. But one thing I do try to do is when I believe I hear his voice clearly, I do my best to obey it. So we start making plans to move to Plano and come to one community church. And the cool thing about coming to one community church is a lot of the things that I had believed had got challenged by being here. I started to see God in new ways, right? I started to have some of my self-righteousness challenged and things like that. And God started doing new work in me. So I get here and I'm trying my best to serve and get involved and things like that. Again, I come here and I'm still teaching. I'm still in the teaching profession. And I'm just going through life serving, doing life with my family, doing life with my new church family and things like that. And if we can rewind the story just one more time, I remember shortly after I got saved, I was at a church in Denton, and I was a part of a young adult ministry. And I ended up being on like the leadership team, and we did some sort of event or something. And I remember leaving that event and driving in my car saying, man, God, if I could serve you full time, man, that would be an absolute dream of mine. Like that would be super, super dope. Like I wish I could do this all the time. And I remember later in my walk, I remember God speaking to me, and honestly, I only know that it was him speaking now because of how things started to transpire. But I remember having this desire, and I remember saying out loud one day, I believe I'll be doing full-time ministry by the age I'm 33. I believe I'll be doing full-time ministry by the time I'm 33. And I would just say this as it would come to my mind. I would just say it periodically throughout my walk and throughout my time. Now, mind you, I don't know what this is going to look like. I'm just saying what I'm believing. As I'm interacting with people, as I'm, chopping it up with new believers, as I'm talking with unbelievers, I just have this feeling that I'll do full-time ministry by the age of 33. And again, I'm growing up in a space where full-time ministry only looks like one thing. It looks like starting a church, because that's what I saw. I watched my dad do it. When he started his church, he went full-time. He didn't have another job, and I watched God provide for him and our family and all these sorts of things. So fast forward, I get to one community church, and I'm just serving, doing my thing, or doing God's thing, if you will, and serving. And within that first year of me moving to Plano and going to OCC, I hit my 33rd birthday, and I'm still teaching. And I'm just like, okay, well, God, maybe this has been a desire of my heart all these years, and it's just something that I wanted, and you're not actually wanting me to do full-time ministry. Okay, cool. So I'm pursuing being a principal. I'm still in public education, things like that. I go out to try to be a principal, Nobody accepts me. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be staying in the classroom. And I remember that first year of me teaching in Plano ISD, the Monday after the school year ended, I get a phone call and I get offered a position at one community church. And I'm sure y'all can guess what age I was. I was 33. So God ends up once again challenging my thinking, and I learned something unique in that process, that God can show us something or speak something to our hearts. And I think naturally we paint a picture in our mind of what it's going to look like. And God is so far beyond our understanding, and our thinking, and our wisdom is foolishness to him. That he does things in ways that we never could imagine. And he does it in a way to where only he could get the glory. And when I tell you the intricate details of how I get offered this position, it was all God, man. It was all God. Just his faithfulness, even when I'm unfaithful, and him opening that door for me to do full-time ministry by the age of 33. And then getting to live out that dream for a couple of years and just see what that truly, truly looks like, and all the things I've learned and the things my family has been able to benefit from. It's just been an amazing walk with God. And now just kind of knowing some of the things I feel like God is like just calling me to, man, with being able to help couples. Like me and my wife love helping and walking with couples in their marriage, because all the things that we've gone through. Her desiring to do counseling work and just being a great, help to young women, and my desire to just continue to pour into men and help them to be the best they could be, as I continue to try to grow and be the best I can be as well, man. It's just been a really, really awesome journey of watching God change my life, give me things that I don't deserve, like a wife and 4 beautiful kids, and to even be able to do ministry for him full time. Like, it's just been nuts, man. It's been a beautiful journey, and I'm just grateful to have experienced all of it. So as far as like the struggle of pornography and marriage, man, like in the beginning, again, it was really, really rough. Before I got married, I remember kind of being told, it's best to just be honest with your spouse. And I remember telling my wife before I got married, hey, I'm going to keep it funky with you. I have this thing, and I'm not quite over it. I haven't fully just been delivered from it, and every now and then it's an issue. And she was like, "Oh, it's cool, whatever. I got you. We'll figure it out." And then the first time I gave in to temptation in my marriage, I brought it to her because, again, I just wanted to be open and honest with her. She lost it, and when I say she lost it, I don't mean she like flashed out on me or anything like that, but she was so overwhelmed with emotion, and she cried, and she like left the house, and I didn't know where she went, and all this kind of stuff. And I remember in that moment saying, I bet I won't tell her again. I bet I will not bring this up again. And it's caused a lot of pain for my wife, and I understand why she responded the way she did, but even her response to me ended up causing pain in me, to where it's like, well, I thought I could trust her. I thought I could lean on her. I thought I could depend on her kind of supporting me through this and walking with me as I, kind of try to grow in my sanctification and get past it. And over the years, Romans 8:28 starts to come into place, to where all things started to work together for the good, to where it started to, God started working on her and how she viewed me and how she viewed God, and how, what does grace and compassion look like a little bit more in this realm. And I even had to learn more about how to not let the shame and the condemnation continue to beat me down, to where it would push me to it more, as opposed to pushing me to Christ and continuing to hurt my wife and things like that. So over the years, we've been able to work through it a little bit more, and it's better now, right? It's still, a temptation and things like that, and we can have better conversations about it now, and there's times where I go to her before I even give in, and she's a safe space I can come to now, more often, to where it's like, hey, I'm feeling this type of way. Can we pray together? Can we talk about it? Hey, I just want to let you know, if you can't pray for me or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, it's caused some problems, but it has also caused us to see God in new ways and see each other in new ways, and also help us to come out of this fairy tale mindset that we had of, going into this perfect marriage because we both were saved getting married. You thought it was going to be, rainbows and kitty cats or whatever the case may be, right? It's been work, but it's been beautiful work, and I am more than thankful for the wife that God has given me. She is an absolute treasure. She's an absolute treasure, and I don't think I want to do this thing called life with anybody other than her. I think the wonderful thing about being a believer is God does not desire perfection from us or flawlessness, right? I believe in this sanctification process, depending on what you know of Jesus or what your experience with church or religion is. You may think that it's a lot of just behavior modification, but I think over time I've come to learn that sanctification is like character renewal and transformation more than it is behavior modification. And I say that because I think as we grow to look more like Jesus in his character, then our actions naturally follow it. I think about the fruit of the Spirit, right? The proof that the Spirit is operating in you. It's not actions, right? It is character development and character change and inward change that then affects our outward. So I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing as we grow in our relationship with Christ and as we have a relationship with him. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to make bad decisions. Not even just mistakes, we're going to make bad decisions. And we're going to mess up and we're going to misstep and we're going to think we heard God and we actually didn't, or whatever the case may be. But the relationship that we have with God is where he says, okay, I understand. Let's get up. Let's try this again. Let's keep moving. Let's keep going. I've already paid for that. Don't dwell on it. There's no condemnation. Get up, dust yourself off, keep moving. I know you messed up. I get it. It's cool. I love you. Let's go. Let's keep moving. And I just think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Jesus to me is a mystery. And I think he's a mystery to me because I still can't quite wrap my mind around why he loves someone like me. I know the things that I still deal with, struggle with, all these sorts of things, and I tend to hyperfixate on that as opposed to fixating it on him sometimes. But one thing I do believe, and that always kind of brings me back down, is regardless of how I feel, regardless of what I see, I believe that his word is true. And his word is very clear that he loves me. And the fact that I can sit here and have this conversation and say these things is proof of his love. I know where I used to be and I know where I am now. And it is all because of the love that he has for me. And to me, it's still a mystery that, why would he love me? Why would he love me? So to me, Jesus, yeah, he's my savior. He's my friend. He's the Lord of my life and all that. But I think he's a mystery. And I'm cool with continuing to pursue solving that mystery or chasing that mystery and following that mystery. Yeah, for sure. God, first and foremost, I just thank you. I thank you for this day. I thank you for your grace, your mercy. And God, I thank you for transforming my life. And God, I just want to pray for anybody that is watching this video right now. God, I pray that that none of them think that they are too dirty or too filthy or too jacked up or too messed up or too addicted or too far gone to where you either can't reach them or that you don't love them. God, I pray that you will remind them that you see them and that you love them and that you desire to be close to them and that you desire a relationship with them. God, I pray right now that anybody listening to this, that their hearts will be softened and that they will know that there is grace at your throne and that there is forgiveness in your blood and that there is a seat at your table for them if only they would accept the invitation. God, I pray for the believer that may be listening to this that felt alone and felt that their story was either unique or that they were battling struggles on their own. God, I pray that they will know that they have a community of people out there that are just like them, that are doing their best to follow hard after you, and that we fall sometimes, and that we stumble sometimes, and that we make mistakes and bad decisions. But your love is never wavering, and that you are faithful to not just me, but to them as well. God, I just pray that that you would show yourself and reveal yourself to everyone that is listening to this in a very unique way for each one of them, for your glory, and so that they will be drawn closer to you just from hearing this story. God, I pray that you were pleased. I pray that you were glorified, and I pray mostly that you were honored in this time. God, I love you. Thank you for loving me. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.